Welcome to an off-season edition of Kruk and Kuip Extra Innings. This week was also a bye week for the San Francisco 49ers, so we don't really have much to talk about in terms of football. But some of the rumors about Giancarlo Stanton are heating up. The Giants are rumored to be offering Heliot Ramos as possibly part of a trade package. Another possibility for Giancarlo Stanton might be them dumping Brandon Belt's contract on them. Tyler Beatty's another name that's been floated. And another name that's kind of been floated around in a potential trade. Joe Panic's a possibility. And the recently re-signed Johnny Cueto are options being put on the table in a potential trade for Giancarlo Stanton. I personally am not crazy about a trade for Giancarlo Stanton. And it's not because he's a bad player or anything, or he's got an attitude or anything like that. But it has to come down to the fact that he is going to cost the Giants a whole lot of dollars. It would be $295 million left on that $325 million contract. And say what if he's not the same player he is when he comes to the Giants? It's a lot harder to hit a home run at AT&T Park than say Marlins Park, but also they've brought in the fences a bit at Marlins Park. So we'll see how that plays if Giancarlo Stanton can get anywhere near 59 home runs again with the setup at AT&T Park. And second of all, the Giants just don't have shit in the farm to trade either. Heliot Ramos is barely getting out of the fall leagues, and here's the number 4 prospect. That's an area of concern. You have Steven Dugar, who's probably going to start the season off over in AAA next year. And he might be good, and Dugar looked pretty good in the fall league this year. And I think Dugar is going to be the next man up, and he could get an opportunity to audition for an outfield spot in spring training next year based on his performance. And outside of that, your other prospects are Tyler Beatty, Andrew Suarez, another guy who's going to be up in AAA next year. So you might be able to maybe you do get rid of, say, a Shark or a Cueto or possibly Bumgarner. And that was another thing brought up this week by KNBR 580 was, say, the Giants do decide to hold a fire sale, say that they underperform again, we're still near the cellar by next summer, then you have to consider asking Brandon Crawford to waive his no-trade clause. You have another guy or possibly Buster Posey or Madison Bumgarner, 3 players they've said are untouchable. All of a sudden, they get into play. And I think your best trade chip for the Giants, if they need to, and it might have to actually happen because the Giants need prospects that bad, might be Madison Bumgarner. Bumgarner might be a free agent after next year. I think he has one more year of club option, but after that, his salary is going to be somewhere between $150 million and $200 million in the open market, depending on how Bumgarner does this next season. And with the Giants hurting for money the way it is right now, trying to stay below the CBT, it might be a bit more challenging to try to keep Bumgarner in the next couple years. What might be a saving grace, though, is next year you do have Hunter Pence, and that's almost $20 million coming off the books right there. and Denard Span. So that's 25 to 30 million in salary coming off the books next year. So maybe use that money if things say are rosy next year to extend, to maybe go with somewhere between 100 and 150 million 5-year contract for Madison Bumgarner. But also I've seen this route before with Barry Zito, who got 100 million. Matt Cain. Oh, I feel bad for the horse. Half of it wasn't necessarily Matt Cain's fault, as in terms of not living up to the contract. But then that was another one that went, unfortunately, and that was more, I think, injuries than performance. So we shall see. So if I were the Giants, I might be a little weary about extending Madison Bumgarner, but he is still in his prime. That is the upside, is he's close to 30. But how much left will Bumgarner have in the tank when his next contract is up? And that's going to get interesting for Bumgarner. I think Jeff Samardzija, that's certainly a guy that could be gone if the Giants were to fire sale. I think if Samardzija has another good year, can cut down the home runs, he can certainly bring back a top prospect or two. And that's maybe where the Giants should be. I don't think that there's really any viable replacements yet for Crawford. I think Crawford's unmovable. And depending on how Aramis Ramirez does, I think he's going to be in Sacramento next year, how he handles AAA pit. You might see Ramirez, but I think he's still a year out. And if he shines in AAA, then you could plausibly make Posey available via trade if he were to, say, waive his no trade clause. And also, a reason why I think I would not go after Giancarlo Stanton's in 2020, he has an opt-out clause. And maybe he uses his opt-out clause to go play for a contender. So there's that possibility. Maybe you could try to sign Giancarlo Stanton for less money. Third of all, by then you're going to be getting near the deadline for a new CBA. And the shit Scott Boras is trying to put for his players is not good. I don't think that Boras is going to get $200 million for JD Martinez after one good year. I think JD Martinez might get something closer to what Hunter Pence's current contract might be. And then, of course, they're talking about Bryce Harper, who's going to be a free agent next year. And they have him, and Boras wants $400 million for his next contract, and I don't see a team wanting to spend $40 million on one player. It's just not going to happen. But shit like this is why maybe you're going to see a lockout in 2021. I think Scott Boras is going to be the reason why you're going to see a salary cap in the MLB to prevent these horrendous contracts that are currently going on in Major League Baseball. And also, a lot of GMs are really reluctant to pay this shitload of money to players anymore because they've been burned so often. Think Aaron Rowan for the Giants. That was a $60 million bust. But you got players like Miggy Cabrera, who I think is somewhere within the 150 to 250 range of contracts. And that contract has become unmovable. Here we go. Here's the reason why I think that's a myth. And according to one site, they're right. You've got Chicago's contract, Jason Hayward, who was signed a few years ago to an 8-year, $184 million contract, and he's not living up to his contract. And he's really flamed out since that contract. Miggy Cabrera, after 2014, signed to an 8-year, $248 million extension, 6 more guaranteed years remaining, and often injury prone now. I don't see Miggy is gonna will retire probably before that contract is up, and that's going to be a very expensive buyout. That is going to likely be a very expensive buyout for Detroit. You got Cano, who's got a 10-year, $240 million contract, and that's still debatable. Cano's done okay for the Mariners, but he is on the backside of he's on the wrong side of 30, so that's not good for him, so to say. And then, of course, you got Teixeira, A-Rod, Ryan Howard. And then, of course, Panda, where Boston got burned by Panda. Now he's back with the Giants. And the Giants see him more as a bench role next year, so I truly don't think that he's going to get what he wants. So I truly don't think you're going to see $400 million for Bryce Harper, or I really don't see teams giving JD Martinez $200 million in free agency. It's just not going to work. And then another one that's looking for, and then of course, as in terms of what might be happening in the CBA in the coming year, in the coming up next CBA, I really think you're going to see the owners push for a salary cap. So the potential for a lockout is a real possibility on the next MLB CBA. So that's going to get really interesting there. So teams are going to be really reluctant to pay those Giancarlo Stanton type of contracts anymore. I think those type of contracts, the money's going to start coming down. And it looks like Lorenzo Cain is going to has interest between the Blue Jays and Mets. And he has rejected the Royals' $17.4 million contract offer, so we'll see. But I think he's looking for a $100 million contract at this point. That's another one where I'd be reluctant to sign Lorenzo Cain. But I think truly you can maybe go for 1 year in the outfield with, say, a Steven Dugar. Maybe go with 5 outfielders for a while. Maybe have Gorkis in center, or you go with Austin Slater in the center and Gorkas and Wright, and then platoon Span and Pence. That's a real possibility as a stopgap option, or Jay Bruce to a 1-year contract is maybe the way to go if you do strike out on Stanton. And also we have a trade to announce. The Rangers acquire Hunter Cole as part of the Sam Dyson trade last year. And I'm very interested to see how Sam Dyson's going to do in year 2. He will probably be going back to the setup role next year for Mark Melancon. And then your 7th inning guy might be Will Smith next year, so that's going to be a really good setup. Or you might go back and forth between Will Smith and Hunter Strickland. Strickland might certainly be a guy who I think is going to be traded next year since you might have 3 lefties out of the pen. I think you're going to certainly have Ty Block as your swingman lefty specialist. DJ Snelton might be your other lefty specialist. And then certainly you've had a good year last year out of Corey Guerin, but I think he's going to be middle innings next year. And then Kyle Kruk, who also could be serviceable in the late innings if Cricky does well. But that's where you might see if Will Smith is back to form, I could certainly see Hunter Strickland become expendable, depending on where the Giants are. I certainly think Strickland could be expendable, especially with Kyle Kruk, and then you got Tyler Rogers, who's getting close to being major league ready. So we'll see what happens with that. But I certainly think your 7, 8, 9, the bridge to Melancon next year is going to probably go Will Smith, Sam Dyson, and then Mark Melancon. Or you might see a combination of Strickland and Smith in the 7th inning, depending on your matchups. And I think that having 3 lefties in the pen might be a really wonderful thing if Snelton can hold down a bullpen spot next year. And then another trade that has been Carlos Beltran has announced his retirement from Major League Baseball, so I wish him a happy retirement. He did have a short stint with the Giants in 2011 in their failed run to repeat as champions. Wasn't that great of a run for Beltran here in San Francisco. And the Mariners acquired Ryan Healy from the A's for 2 prospects. And John Hart leaves the Atlanta Braves organization after being scandal-ridden, so we'll see who takes over for him. And I think that is it for Giants news this week. Next week will be Thanksgiving, and then the Niners will be back next Sunday playing against the Sea Turkeys. I'll be on with another update after the Niners and Sea Turkeys next Sunday. So everybody have a Thanksgiving. Please don't drink and drive. See you next time.